Spending the stimulus. Top officials update Congress on the efforts to help stabilize the U.S. economy. We're on Capitol Hill. Safety measures. A report from Rome on changes to the mask during the coronavirus crisis. Area of concern. The Navajo Nation has surpassed New York as the country's worst affected region per capita from COVID-19. And answering the call. A request goes out during televised masses, and EWTN viewers really rose to the occasion. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, May 19th, 2020. Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. Tonight, President Donald Trump is praising the nation's farmers and ranchers for their response to the coronavirus. At the same time, he is giving the World Health Organization a firm 30-day deadline. And we are learning more about his decision to take a controversial malaria drug. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports now. Owen?
Tracy, a very busy day here at the White House. At the top of the list, essential workers feeding the nation during the pandemic and a $19 billion announcement.
The food chains are now back to almost working perfectly again.
President Donald Trump meets with farmers and ranchers to promote a new coronavirus assistance program. He says it'll include $19 billion to help them provide food directly to needy families.
We fought hard for this. These payments will compensate farmers for losses related to the global pandemic caused by China.
The president also takes aim at the World Health Organization.
They have to clean up their act. They have to do a better job. They have to be much more fair to other countries, including the United States, or we're not going to be involved with them anymore. We'll do it a separate way.
The president wrote a letter slamming the World Health Organization over its response to the pandemic and cozying up to China, warning it has 30 days to commit to major substantive improvements or else lose U.S. funding. White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany addressed the issue in front of the White House.
Issues like that, where there's a very clear China bias at play, should be looked at very carefully and is being looked at very carefully as we make our decision.
Meanwhile, the White House doctor defends President Trump's decision to take hydroxychloroquine, a malaria drug with potentially deadly side effects.
Well, the president said himself he's taking it. That's a given fact. He said it. The purpose of this letter was to show that Dr. Conley agreed with the analysis that the benefits outweighed the risks.
Also today, Vice President Mike Pence praised news about the development of what he calls a promising new vaccine. He spoke at a meeting of the National Space Council, which is excited about next week, when NASA astronauts will launch from U.S. soil for the first time since the space shuttle retired.
Now back to that drug. The president has received some criticism for using it. He says that it offers him an additional level of safety, that frontline workers use it, and he calls it an individual decision. Tracy?
Okay, thank you, Owen. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reporting for us tonight. Thank you again, Owen. U.S. monetary experts fielded tough questions from the Senate Banking Committee today on how the more than $2 trillion in the CARES Act is being spent to battle the COVID-19 pandemic. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports. Eric?
Well, Tracy, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin painted a very bleak picture of the future and due to the economy and the coronavirus. However, in the same breath, they say that there is hope on the horizon in the form of loans and other government assistance that will help small families and small businesses get back on their feet in the coming months.
People earning less are the ones being hardest hit. This reversal of economic fortune has caused a level of pain that is hard to capture in words, as lives are upended amid great uncertainty about the future.
Words of compassion for Americans hurt by the loss of jobs during the COVID-19 pandemic, as U.S. unemployment is expected to peak around 25%.
People are going to need jobs. So does this mean that you will require companies that receive the bailout money from the taxpayers to keep their workers on payroll?
It is our intent in the 13-3 facilities to fulfill both the spirit and the details of the law. So different facilities have different requirements.
The Treasury Secretary said the U.S. government's plan should be to borrow a lot of money in the short term and then
What I'd like to do is lock in a significant amount at very low interest rates so that the money we're borrowing can be paid back and dealt with over a long period of time.
Senators asked why big companies are getting relief funds meant for small businesses and questions Secretary Mnuchin on the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP.
Do we have a time frame, Mr. Secretary, for further guidance regarding PPP loan forgiveness?
There's some guidance that just came out on loan forgiveness that we believe deals with most of the major issues.
Republicans and senators alike said that reopening up the economy is essential, and if we don't do it soon, then we can have permanent damage. Now, the Federal Reserve Chairman did tell senators that we could not expect a full recovery in the economy until the end of next year, 2021. Tracy.
Correspondent Eric Rosales reporting from Capitol Hill for us tonight. Thank you so much, Eric. Joining me now on Skype with his analysis is Joel Griffith, Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Joel, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me tonight.
Absolutely. So, Joel, in today's hearing, we heard the question raised about whether there's a rush to reopen that's actually putting the nation's economic health ahead of workers. What do you think about that? And does it have to be an either-or situation?
No, this does not have to be an either-or situation. I think we see many states, not all, but many states that are reopening, and these are being done in a safe manner. I spent quite a bit of time the last few weeks visiting my family in Georgia, and we just heard the mayor of Georgia admit that this is not nearly as scary and dangerous as she thought it was going to be. In fact, these businesses are open safely all across Georgia and many other states as well. If anything, what we see is we see a number of states that are looked to be actually opening too slowly. The bottom line is we have to protect health, but if we continue this broad-based economic shutdown much longer, we are running the very real risk of an economic depression, and that will not just have economic consequences, that'll have severe social consequences and health consequences as well. It is time to begin reopening society.
Joel, there's also a continued debate over unemployment benefits, how much and how long. What are your thoughts on this and the best approach?
Well, look, I think that politicians had very good intentions in passing the unemployment package a month ago. But the fact is, this has negative consequences because that package pays every person who's unemployed, regardless of how much they're making. It gives them $600 per week in federal benefits on top of state benefits. So what you see is that in many areas, the majority of people that are unemployed are actually receiving substantially more unemployed than they were receiving on the job. And of course, in individual circumstances, they might consider that to be a plus. But if you're talking about the economy wide, that means you are incentivizing people to actually not go back to work. That means that we are actually nudging the economy towards a severe, long-lasting recession because most people, it's just a fact. If you're going to be paid more to not work, a lot of people will actually choose that rather than going on the job. And I've been talking to a lot of business owners, including family friends that run small businesses, and they are telling me that people are already resisting the possibility of coming back as some of these counties are reopening because they're making so much more off the job.
Well, Joel, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell said today that the Fed's lending programs for medium-sized businesses and state and local governments will begin operating by the end of this month. What impact do you think that'll have on restoring consumer confidence?
Well, I think when it comes to restoring consumer confidence, what that is going to take is actually allowing people to go back to work, to re-engage with their communities and being able to produce more. Look, some of the actions the Federal Reserve took early on were necessary. The purpose of the Fed is to ensure that solvent companies, solvent financial institutions have access to credit. But going ahead and just printing trillions of dollars, which is what we've done. The Federal Reserve has printed more than $2.5 trillion in just about the past 6 weeks. And sure, temporarily that is making people feel better. But longer term, economic growth requires allowing companies to produce, allowing people to work. And I'm actually quite concerned about the possibility of the Federal Reserve bailing out cities and states and counties. They're talking about lending to $1 trillion, possibly over $1 trillion to these some of these states that actually have very severe budget problems, not because of COVID. We're talking about states like California and New York that have had years of mismanagement, and you're going to force good states that have good managers such as Florida and Texas to bail them out. That is unfair, and we see a big push for that right now.
Well, Joel, thank you so much for your insight. Joel Griffith, Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Thanks again, Joel.
Thank you. Thanks.
India is evacuating millions of people from coastal areas as a super cyclone is bearing down on West Bengal state. Disaster response workers are warning people to prepare for high winds, flooding rains, and tidal waves as Cyclone Amphan has winds of 140 miles per hour, but it is forecast to weaken before it hits eastern India and Bangladesh overnight. Authorities are trying to evacuate millions while maintaining social distancing. China claims the number of new asymptomatic cases of COVID-19 is decreasing in the province where the pandemic started. A Chinese health official says over 4 million tests were conducted in Hubei province since the lockdown was lifted last month. The results show only about 700 people were infected but are not showing symptoms. Protesters in Chile face off with riot police. They are demanding food as the lockdown is affecting poor neighborhoods outside of Santiago. Protesters blocked streets and threw rocks and firebombs at police, who responded with water cannons to disperse the demonstrators. Authorities say soup kitchens have multiplied since the quarantine started in March. Museums in Rome are finally open after being shut since March. That said, not many visitors are showing up.
It's very strange. We've come here a few times over the past year, and it's always a pretty busy museum, and now it's very odd to walk around with nobody. The piazza outside is barren. Walking up the big staircase, there's nobody. So it's a strange, almost eerie experience.
The Capitoline Museum is usually one of the busiest, but rooms are nearly empty. Everyone has to get their temperature checked and sanitize their hands. Strict measures are also in place to avoid large gatherings. There is still no date set for other attractions, such as the Colosseum or the Vatican museums. Churches in Italy reopened for public masses yesterday, and some have concerns over how Holy Communion is being distributed.
Ovvio che non è la stessa cosa, bisogna avere molta cura.
One parish priest notes gloves are needed to distribute communion, which are being washed afterwards. The protocol states priests and ministers must wear gloves and masks and avoid direct contact with parishioners. Pope Francis asked everyone to follow the rules given in order to protect others. Edward Pentin, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joins us now. Ed, so good to see you.
Good to see you, Tracy. Good to be back.
Well, Ed, the Italian bishops and Italian government worked together and signed a joint protocol to allow public masses to resume. What are some of the main changes to Mass now?
Well, first of all, it should be pointed out that the Masses never really ended here. Of course, the priests have been celebrating privately, but public Masses were suspended. But major changes, perhaps, that people are noticing are that the sign of the peace is no longer exchanged. That you have to wear masks and there's social distancing at Mass now, and you can't have more than a certain number of people in a church at one time for Mass, depending on the size of the church. There's thermal temperature scanning at the basilicas here, but probably the biggest change is the priests are required to wear masks and disposable gloves when distributing Holy Communion.
Ed, what's been the reaction to public Mass returning? What are people saying?
Well, many, of course, are overjoyed after having 2 months of Masses suspended here and to be back to be able to celebrate the sacraments again. And churches seem to be fuller than usual, especially for daily Masses. But there are, as I say, concerns about these disposable gloves. People have said that the body of Christ should not be handled in such a way, and people are concerned about what happens to the gloves afterwards. And they wonder whether they really do offer protection that the government and the bishops have said they do. And not all priests are sure about what to do about this, and there are alternatives in terms of using tweezers or other ways to distributing Holy Communion.
Ed, do you think these changes in Italy, do you think they could become standard for churches around the world?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because all the measures that have come from Italy, Italy, of course, was the most heavily hit by the coronavirus at the beginning. And the way that Rome directed this and the way the Italian bishops directed what the Masses should do, or how the celebration of Masses should be carried out, was kind of emulated worldwide. But I think bishops will adapt according to, of course, to their local situation. and whether the church should follow what the government says so closely, because the government tends to see the Mass and the sacraments as non-essential, and the churches or the bishops have tended to go along with that view. And I think there's a will that if this happens again, that the bishops have a little bit more autonomy and decide themselves the best way to go ahead with this.
Well, Ed, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your insight with us. We really appreciate it. Edward Pentin, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register. Thanks again, Ed.
Thank you, Tracy.
Coming up, a U.S. region with strict stay-at-home orders is being hit hard by the coronavirus pandemic. And Pope Francis makes an announcement regarding the church in Alaska. The Navajo Nation has surpassed New York as the country's worst infected area with the coronavirus. The nation, which spans parts of Arizona, Utah, and New Mexico, is sparsely populated, and it has one of the strictest stay-at-home orders in the U.S. So what is behind the infections? Correspondent Mark Irons reports. Mark?
Tracy, the Navajo Nation is now reporting nearly 4,000 COVID-19 cases in a population of 175,000. To put that in perspective, they've now passed New York with the highest infection rate per capita in the U.S.
The beauty of the Navajo Nation masks the vengeance coronavirus has exacted on its people, even in the most remote places. In this household,
out of nowhere, it came about and just whipped through us.
Felicita Jones is one of 5 people in her family who has contracted the virus.
I could just go, but I didn't want to go to the hospital.
Jones didn't want to go to the hospital because too many people she knows never made it back home alive. The Navajo Nation says it has tested more people than any other state, 11% of its population. But unlike New York, just getting to a hospital with these kind of resources can take hours.
It's really hard for them to get the care they need if they need to be intubated. If they've got to have someone transport them from a facility to like Albuquerque, Phoenix is where we're starting to send people because our ICU is only 8 beds.
The Navajo Nation spans 27,000 square miles. There are no short distances here, which is one of the difficulties getting resources to its people.
There are a lot of people living here.
The president of the Navajo Nation has placed the strictest of measures on his people. 8 p.m. curfews on weekdays, and on weekends, a 57-hour lockdown. Not even the gas stations are open. And their lucrative tourism and entire gaming industry are closed down until further notice.
We're talking more than tens of millions, not just amongst the gaming, not just amongst the tourism, but also all of our other enterprises throughout the Navajo Nation.
According to the Navajo Nation president, experts believe the outbreak is at its peak right now. COVID-19 has claimed the lives of at least 140 Navajo people. Tracy.
Correspondent Mark Irons reporting for us tonight. Thank you, Mark. Well, the Archdiocese of Boston says its public masses will resume Saturday. Catholic officials have installed a number of safety measures. Among them, churches must be less than 40% capacity, and the faithful must follow social distancing guidelines. Masses were suspended on March 13th. Pope Francis has merged 2 dioceses in Alaska. The new diocese of Anchorage-Juneau is home to around 55,000 faithful. It covers territory larger than the state of Montana. The Holy Father appointed Bishop Andrew E. Balisero as the head of the diocese. And for more on this story, including a look at Bishop Balisero's background, visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. Up next, reaction to a special delivery from EWTN viewers. What began on Mother's Day as a way to honor the Virgin Mary and encourage people to pray the Rosary has become and continues to be a blessing in more ways than one. During Mother's Day Mass at Our Lady of the Angels Chapel at EWTN's headquarters, Father Joseph Mary asked viewers to send a rose as a sign of their commitment to pray the Rosary. The response was immediate and bountiful, with thousands of roses filling our Irondale, Alabama chapel to overflowing. Joining me now on Skype to talk more about this wonderful response is Father John Paul Mary, EWTN employee chaplain. Father John Paul, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Tracy.
I know that you repeated Father Joseph Mary's call for roses in your homily the next day. You said that Father Joseph lit the match and you threw gasoline on the fire. I love that. Tell us, what was it like to see dozens of roses begin to arrive, and were you surprised by the magnitude?
I guess I shouldn't be surprised, Tracy. I mean, this is a network of miracles. And I was just talking to Father Joseph today. I think this really just shows God's favor. It shows God's favor on us, on what we're doing in this mission, and almost like a blanket of Our Lady's protection. And I experienced joy. I think that is the sentiment that I experienced right away, was when I saw all those flowers coming in. It's just joy.
Yes, and so very beautiful. I know the gifts for Our Lady have also been a blessing to florists in the community, because they've been hit hard by the economy right now. What are you hearing from them?
Yeah, so no weddings, no funerals. So there were a lot of florists who were wondering, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to pay my employees? So when one florist gets 75 orders in one day, they are so thrilled. They're so happy. And there are viewers calling in from all over the world. And our viewers, our EWTN viewers and family, are evangelizing them. And they're not Catholic. And they're telling them about the Fatima message and Our Lady and the Catholic faith. And so it's been a real sense of dialogue. And it also has brought the florists closer together, I think. They have all come together really to fill a lot of these orders. We got 60 orders today of bouquets, and I think we have 29 coming tomorrow already.
That's amazing. So many blessings. I know many of the flowers from Mary's Garden, as it's being affectionately called, are actually getting a second life. How are they helping to uplift people in the community? Can you talk about that?
Sure, Tracy. Well, this morning I took 50 bouquets to the poor that will be distributed to poor families. And it's to a community of Franciscans who works directly with the poor in our diocese. And I shared with them, I said, please have these have a home that find joy. For those who may be down, for those who may be experiencing misfortune in life in these times, find them a home. And also, Father Joseph took them to a nursing home as well last week. So we've been able to give them a second life, as we've been calling them.
That is so wonderful. I know that you're also encouraging people to send that is spiritual bouquets. Can you talk a little bit about that and what it's like to see this type of outpouring of love for Our Lady continue in this way?
Sure. We know our Lord gave us his mother as one of the greatest gifts that he has given us from the cross. He said to her, "Woman, behold your son, and son, behold your mother." And so we naturally have an affection, a love for her. And so people are pouring out their love for her. If you read some of the petitions that people send on their flowers, it would just bring you to tears. The love that people have for God, the love that people have for Our Lady, for the network, for what it's done for them in their life. It's just been amazing, really.
That's so wonderful. Father, before I let you go, if viewers would like to send a spiritual bouquet, what should they do?
Sure. They can write to EWTN 5817 Old Leeds Road, Irondale, Alabama 35210, or to email viewer@ewtn.com. That's viewer@ewtn.com. And just make a pledge to what you are going to say, like a rosary. Some people have pledged 12 rosaries, 24 rosaries, 36 rosaries. Really, the flowers represent, each rose represents one rosary. And Tracy, we've had over 6,000 flowers sent the last week.
That is absolutely incredible. Wow. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. Good to talk to you, Father John Paul.
Thank you, Tracy.
And before we go, a reminder that EWTN broadcasts Mass throughout the day. Mass airs at 8 a.m., noon, and 7 p.m. Eastern. We are also airing other special programming, and you can find our schedule at EWTN.com. There you will also find Eucharistic adoration throughout the day. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. We're back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night and God bless.